second place, so his hopes were high at Hassmoor. But hopes are one thing, what happens on the track is something else. Watch this. Drifting to his left, too heavy on the brake, unbalanced, and end of story. Let's see it again from our camera at the side. And as you can see, there's more to driving a sophisticated triple turbo pulling tractor that meets the eye. A rough ride for Chris de Roorn. And 56.17 the distance, which takes us to the result of the first round. Maximum points to Magcal Bits and Pieces, and Deer Hunter was just 11 centimetres from taking third place from Blue Power. From Superstocks to Modifieds, and we go directly to the pull-off in the 4.4-ton Eurocup class. This is Eugen Kiemler, a museums killer from Germany, and he was joined by Green Fighter, Desperate Dan, Fox and Green Spirit. All oversteering with the front wheels, out of shape, out of distance, not a good run that from Eugen, and he knew it. 75.07 for the others to beat. The next to pull was fellow countryman Heinz Josef Horstkamp, known as Horsty, and his machine a Green Fighter. It's a triple Allison configuration, with space in the middle for a fourth one in the heavier 5.4-ton class, which incidentally he won back in '94 when the European Championships were held at Walibi Flevo. Well, he's passed the marker flag set by Museums Killer, and the new distance to beat, 77.37. And then it was the turn of Desperate Dan, the holder of 9 European titles, but never the Eurocup, which was number 1 on his wanted list, which no one doubted after this run. A second full pull, and that left an almost impossible task ahead for Fox from Denmark. And when Peter Larsen drifted dangerously to his left and had to shut down, it was all over. However, Fox had done enough to comfortably take second place with 86.97. So their chances of recapturing the title they won in '93 and '94 were still also pretty good. Here's the official result, and the big surprise, Green Spirit, the Eurocup holder, a disappointing run in 60.71. Her camera and ours turned to the final class from Hassmoor, the Minis. The best runs from the 7-way pull-off. 5 from Germany, 2 from Holland, and here's one of them, Simply Irresistible and Egbert Dross. Simply Irresistible trying to come out of the shadows of Mini Breaker last year, and he may do that with that run of 87.44. Now it's the turn of the second Dutchman, Gert Dingerink and Lambada 4, last year's Dutch champion, 4th in the Eurocup as well. And the 18-year-old student from Zwolle did well. Let's see that run again from our side camera. Gert's Chevy 572 kicking up the dust, but over 10 metres down to his fellow countryman. .17 for Lambada 4. And what about the challenge from Germany? Thomas Zimmermann from Ettlinscheis is always a tough challenger. During the closed season, he made some modifications to his Mini, repainted it red, found a sponsor, and here he is with Joker. But he was quite a way behind the winner. His distance, 74.15, gave him 4th place. And finally, Helmut Schwartz and Ghostbuster. Him and his brother Eugen building a new turbine Mini, but it's not ready yet. And by the looks of it, Ghostbuster should be renamed Dustbuster. But there's still a lot of life in the 1993 European champion. 78.41 gave him second place. Here's the result, Simply Irresistible, simply the best on the day. Time for us to move on to round 2 in France and the Normandy town of Bernay, especially well known for its cluster of antique shops and the Saturday market, which draws people in from miles around. It's also the only Eurocup event with an evening pulling session, which always seems to produce some pretty dramatic pictures. So round 2 of the 3.4-ton Superstocks, and Pekka Hörby was trying to improve on his second place at Hassmoor with Delta Power. And if you don't get the balance right or alter it, things start to happen. Look at this. And Delta Power doing an undignified split. If we look at it again, too much hopping and bopping was enough to splay the front wheels, and Pekka Hörby wisely shutting down. His mechanic, Jyrki Mäkipataja, examining the damage and saying something rude in Finnish, no doubt. But he wasn't the only one to hit problems. The same fate befell Jeff Ashcroft and Running Deer from Great Britain. Sliding off course, he tries to correct it, and then he does the rock and roll. And that's another pull that's worth seeing again in slow motion. High in the air, eases off, drops like a stone, the left front wheel breaks, and the cowling falls out. But apart from that, quite an uneventful pull. His brother looking to see if the engine's damaged, but I think most of the damage was to Jeff's pride, who says, you wanted action, you got action. And there were only 3 full pulls. Red Alert ready to challenge Magcal Bits and Pieces, with Deer Hunter the clear outsider. A lot of people now packed into this arena on the outskirts of Bernay, and if previous experience is anything to go by, they'll still be here by the last pull. That'll be well after midnight. Well, it was Carol Vermeeren and Deer Hunt who got the pull-off underway. Carol sitting in for Wim Janssen, who was building a new workshop back home in Holland and couldn't spare the time to come to France. And he gets 1 or 2 drives a year, so Carol determined to give it his best shot. And he's done it. 82.77 was the distance the others had to beat. Now Magcal Bits and Pieces, with Leonard Griffian taking over from Willem Veldhuizen. It was a pool where every centimetre had to count, and Leonard couldn't have done better. Note the chalk line on the track. Almost in the middle of his rear wheel. Well, he's taken the lead, no question of that. The only question is, what is the new distance to aim for? 93.41. So the pressure was now fairly and squarely on Peter Clark and Red Alert. The first head-to-head encounter with Magcal Bits and Pieces. Who was going to win? Peter drifting away from the camera, and he was just a little shorter of the mark. The crowd looking up to the scoreboard, and it wasn't good news for Red Alert. 91.1, Magcal Bits and Pieces had won by over 2 metres. And Leonard being congratulated by his wife. Well, things were really going well for the Dutch team. Now here's the official result. Deer Hunter moving up to 3rd place, with the 2 Valmet Caesar and Mega Power taking 4th and 5th. And Magcal couldn't have made a better start. Maximum points from the first 2 rounds. Moving on swiftly to round 2 of the minis, Helmut Schwartz with his Rover Meteor tank engine did what he could to stop the dominance of the Dutch. Ghostbuster was the best of the German contingent, but he still wasn't good enough to get into the pull-off. There were only 2 full pulls, and they went to Landy and Simply Irresistible. We don't start trouble, we just finish it. The motto on the mini sledge weight box, which Dirk Feenstra would see if he looked round, but he was lighting his fire. So Landy, all fired up, ready to do well. His Turbo Mecha Turbo 3 turbine, taken from a French helicopter. And Dirk almost flew down the track. Just kissing the 100-metre mark. 95.85 was the distance for Landy. Now, could Simply Irresistible emulate Bits and Pieces and make it 2 out of 2? For the second successive round, Mini Breaker, the rating holder, being forced to stay at home because of work commitments, so Egbert Dross from Dronten had every opportunity to hammer home his advantage. But it was not to be. Problems with his engine relegated him to 2nd place with a distance of 73.12. So Dirk Feenstra was the surprising winner, Simply Irresistible 2nd, and Lambarda 4, who was just short of a full pull in his quali, was 3rd. In the points table, Simply Irresistible had a comfortable lead over his nearest rivals, and Landy probably wishing he'd made a trip to Hassmoor and picked up some points there. We move on to day 2 at Bernay and the 4.4-ton modifieds, where 8 had qualified for the pull-off. 2 from Holland, 1 each from Belgium, Germany, Denmark, France, Great Britain and Sweden. But once again, it turned into a scrap between Fox and Desperate Dan, with Oregon 2 the only other serious opposition. Cameras were at the ready as Fox made its run. The Danish team probably attend more events and cover more miles than any other pulling team in Europe, but this was a very bumpy ride for Peter Larsen. You see he's got a different engine configuration. Instead of 2 rows of 3, there's 2 of 2 and 1 at the back. His distance 96.61 for Fox. That's assistant commentator Carol Iberts waiting for the next to run. She had a special interest. Her boyfriend Christophe shared the driving on Oregon 2, but today Christophe was mechanic for Freddie Loney. Hard down on the throttle, and Freddie drove himself into 3rd place, some 2 meters behind Fox. Certainly the Frenchman pleased with the result. 94.43 was the distance, and now to one of the big men in European tractor pulling, Brian Armistead and Desperate Dan. Could the lad from near Blackpool in the north of England record his 2nd successive victory in the Eurocup? And the answer was an emphatic yes. His 2nd full pull, and he left all the opposition well behind. And it was difficult to see who was likely to be able to challenge this British team who left nothing to chance. There's the result. And even Q18 Popeye, who on a good day is a match for most, couldn't get on the winner's rostrum. In the points table, it was looking good for the leader, with only Fox mounting a serious challenge. Time for a break. We'll be back with round 3 after this.
Motormania with Vredestein, designed to protect you.
And welcome back to the Eurocup review of the year. And we go now to round 3 at Hörby in southern Sweden. It was the venue for the 1995 European Championships, which were very, very successful, and this year they applied for and were awarded the round in the Eurocup. The weather up to the event left a lot to be desired. Lots of rain and showers, and the same weather was promised for the weekend, so the track was very muddy, but the flowers were nice. The first event from Hörby, round 3 of the Minis, and here's one of the few girls in tractor pulling. We saw Margaret Kaiser at Hassmoor. This is Birgitta Kronvall with Wild Thing. Her husband Stefan used to drive it, but now he's her mechanic. It's a Chevy 509, and Birgitta came from Ystad. And a very solid and steady job she did too. Oh, but the splits from her front wheels at the end. And her distance, that was quite impressive as well. 81.80 was enough to earn her 3rd place overall. She was quite pleased about it as well. But like Bernay, there were only 2 full pulls. This time it was Lambada 4 who was going to have to challenge Simply Irresistible. The dodgy weather keeping many people at home. In the pull-off, it was Gert Dingerink who was the first to go. And he certainly used all the track. First one way, then the other. And a distance of 76.59 for Lambada 4. A mini fan watching the Minis. So 76.59 to beat. And Simply Irresistible showed its class and illustrated that was really no problem at all. coasting over the 80-metre mark and then easing off, no point in damaging the engine. 86.85 for Egbert Dross and Simply Irresistible, and that was over 10 metres up on his Dutch friend. But Birgitte Kronwall became the first woman on the winner's rostrum in the Euro Cup when she took third place. Landy, Joker and Ghostbuster missed the event because of national competitions, so the top two able to increase their lead. Time now for the super stocks, and there were 4 full pools, and everyone was looking forward to the rematch between Red Alert and Magcal Bits and Pieces. Peter Clark had the honour of going first, and he was convinced it was going to be third time lucky for him and his new international from America. Quite a bumpy track, but he kept a cool head and set a real tough target for the others to aim for. 90.63 metres. Leonard Griffian was again behind the wheel of Magcal Bits and Pieces, but he drifted over to his right, nearly went out of bounds, and that was where he lost the pull-off. The distance, 78.34, over 12 metres behind the Englishman. So Deer Hunter and Delta Power had every chance. The Valmet was the first to try its luck, and Pekka Hörby also found that the heavy track was not so easy to get to grips with. 4 metres short of Bits and Pieces and into third place. So that left 1 to pull. Wim Janssen back behind the wheel of Deer Hunter, steering the John Deere from Druten near Nijmegen. He also found it heavy going, and on this occasion had to settle for 4th place. 72.79 for Deer Hunter. So Red Alert won his first Euro Cup round, and Blue Power, who normally goes well in heavy conditions, didn't even make the pull-off. In the points table, Red Alert started to close the gap to Bits and Pieces. With 1 round to be discarded, the difference was only 4 points. So Peter Clark back on top, his first Euro Cup success for a long, long time.
Peter Clark som I många år har bott I svenskarnas hjärtan.
And we move swiftly on to the pull-off in the 4.4-ton modifieds. Scandinavia well represented and Desperate Dan unbeaten for the first 2 rounds. The Fox team were also hoping that their luck was about to change. Peter Larsen is the driver with 4 brothers behind him acting as mechanics, cameramen and anything else that needs doing. But Peter's drifted wide, and he shut down just before he would have gone out of bounds, round about the 100-metre mark. Fox really doing the business, as you can see from our side camera. And 99.49 proved to be a difficult target to beat. Desperate Dan had engine problems, his rear right was shut down, but Brian Armistead never gives up. He'd sooner get out and push than not take part at all. So down on power, he still decided to give it a go. But the last few meters were hard, and he had to accept a distance of 84.67 meters. The German challenge came from Green Fighter, with Enrico Volaton taking over behind the wheel from Heinz-Josef Forskamp. Incidentally, the Green Fighter team is based around Munster. Well, Enrico did well, but not quite enough to beat Fox, although the checkered flag was tantalizingly close. 91.33, and Green Fighter pushed Desperate Dan into third place. Finally from Norway, Batman with Tor Oddvar from Stavanger, powered by a single Rolls-Royce Griffin that he'd acquired from Green Spirit. But the Norwegian unable to get close to the top 3. And with 72.52 meters, he did well to take a deserved 4th place. So Peter Larsen taking the honours in Hörby, flanked by Enrico Volatone and Brian Armistead. Here's the official result. Fox first with over 8 metres to spare, and the home favourite Super Special relegated to 5th place. And there was now a tie at the top of the points table, although with 1 round to be discarded, Desperate Dan did have a slight advantage. And before we move on to the next round, Delta Power really got the crowd talking with this run in the 4.4 tonne Super Stocks. Everything seemed to be okay. And then, at the end of the run, a fireball, and even the experienced Pekka Hörby quickly out of his seat, wondering what on earth had happened. And in slow motion, it was pretty spectacular. A little hop, and then flames coming out of just about every opening. And the distance didn't matter at all. Now we move on to round 4, which was at Walibi Flevo in Holland. And unlike the rain affected in Sweden, the weather at Walibi was just about perfect. The valmets were back in perfect working order. And Red Alert was being given some spit and polish. And it wasn't the only one. Mechanics and even the distance markers had to look their best. At this, almost the home of European tractor pulling. Klas Wiedek, the master of ceremonies, introducing the first event, the Super Stocks. And it was Pekka Hörby with Caesar who we'll see first. Still waiting for his tyres from America, and when he needs to cut the ones he's got, this is what he does. Other drivers use different ways for cutting their tyres, but it's always a hard and tiresome job. Caesar, he took a little detour on its run, and it probably cost Pekka a full pull. Just look and see how close he came. And it earned him 4th place. But there were only 3 full pulls, and it was again the top 3 in the points table who were to fight it out. Wim Janssen, the John Deere sales mechanic, and Deer Hunter got the ball rolling. And again, in front of his home crowd, he turned in a useful pull in the middle 80s. 84.16. But everyone knew that the winner would come from Magcal Bits and Pieces or Red Alert. Leonard Griffin was on holiday, so Willem Veldhuizen took the hot seat on Bits and Pieces, needing a win to stay in front of the international threat from England. He's passed Deer Hunter and edged into the 90s, 90.29 for the John Deere. Would that be enough to win? Peter Clark seemed to be getting faster and faster as he got to know his new obsession, as his son called it. And nothing would please Peter more than coming to Holland and beating Willem on his home ground. And that is exactly what happened. Easing off when he could see he'd won, a fine win for the international magnum called Red Alert. All his mechanic says that's the way to do it. The winning margin was over 5 metres. Willem congratulating his English rival, who was better on the day. These two go back a long way. Now here's the result, 5 metres 36, the margin between the top two, and it was a little closer between Caesar and Demolition Deer. And although Bits and Pieces stayed in front on the points table with 1 round to discard, they were level on points, with Deer Hunter increasing his advantage over the Valmets. Now it's the turn of the Minis, where on this occasion there were no less than 9 full pulls, with Simply Irresistible by far the quickest. This one of the first real hot days of the Dutch summer, so many people had chosen to go to the beach, but there was still a good crowd basking in the glorious sunshine. This was Landy, who was at that time 3rd in the Dutch Championships. He'd beaten Irresistible at Bernay. Could he do it again? Dirk Feenstra and his mascot set a target of 88.18 to beat. But it was as if the team from Dronten were determined to live up to their name. 30-year-old Egbert Dross opened up his Keith Black 540, and then it was not a question of could he, but by how much would he win. The advantage over Landy, just under 10 metres. Second flagman Søren Petersen from Denmark moving up the marker. And the local lad from just down the road at Zwolle, Gert Dingerink and Lambarder 4 were ready for their run. Fourth in the Eurocup in 95 and looking to improve on that in 96. No, not enough to challenge the leader, but good enough to take over second place. Probably discussing the fine technicalities of tractor pulling. Or this new machine from Ghostbuster 2, powered by a Russian Isotov turbine and driven by Helmut Schwarz. Quite impressive. And good enough to take fourth place on his first Eurocup outing with 86.58. So Egbert again on top of the winners rostrum, followed by Gert and Dirk and the pretty presentation girls. Reigning champion Mini Breaker failed for the second successive event to reach the pull-off because of technical problems, so the Dutch dominance continued. With that win, Simply Irresistible almost had one hand on the Eurocup. Only Lambarder 4 could stand in his way. That's the Dutch Tractor Pulling Association's telephone hotline. You can speak Dutch, of course. And it was a big success, I'm told, in 96. Right, we move on to the modifieds, and this is Fox trying to follow up the success from Hörby. But Peter Larsen drifted wide, oversteered with the front wheels and surprisingly failed to reach the pull-off. Now from our end camera you can see the front wheels, they dig in and unbalance the tractor, and he lost his momentum which he couldn't regain. And that could have cost the Danes the Eurocup. They failed to reach the pull-off where 7 teams were represented. There were 4 from Holland and 1 each from Germany, Belgium and Great Britain. The De Hoff team from Belgium had built a completely new Terminator. They'd started with 2 Isotov turbines and had now added 2 more. Quite an impressive machine. But on this occasion he had an appointment with Out of Bounds and was disqualified. But Terminator, very much a force to be reckoned with in the future. From a newie to an oldie, who at that time had won 5 out of 6 rounds in the Dutch Championship, Jan van Alphen and Q18 Popeye. And he made it to just over the 80-metre mark, 83.66. Would that be enough to beat the 9 times European champion Desperate Dan? But Brian Armistead had had problems in an earlier class, and those problems continued. Down on power and down on distance, he was well short of Popeye, whose fans started to celebrate. 76.4 for the Englishman. But the Popeye fans had reckoned without Ib Koopmanschie. Kees Sitzling chose this moment to pull out a fine run and to beat them all. His first victory of the year in the 4.4-ton class. And then it was the turn of the Koopmanschie fans to party. So Kees Sitzling broke his TV jinx. Every time he's been filmed in the past, he's had problems. So victory was unexpected, but very sweet for the 30-year-old farmer from Friesland. So Ib Koopmanschie won by 5.5 metres, and Green Spirit had another disappointing run. Unbeatable last year, but beset with problems in 96. Desperate Dan third again, but after 1 discard, still only 4 in front of Fox. So as Kees, Jan and Brian get their trophies and flowers, we'll take another short break, back with round 5 after this. This is Tractor Pulling's Eurocup roundup of the year. We go to round 5 of 6 to Herning in Denmark. 2/3 of the season over, and none of the top teams can afford to make any mistakes now. First we go to the Super Stocks, where 8 teams qualified for the pull-off. All the top 3 teams were there, and so was the local lad, Niels Damgaard and Blue Power from Denmark. And it was that combination that the large crowd hoped could provide a shock. Niels always seems to go well at Herning, and he didn't disappoint his fans. He was the first to pull, and he set the distance to aim for. His wife leading the applause. That distance, 83.79. One by one, the others tried and failed to beat it until Magkal Bits and Pieces came on the scene. Willem Veldhuizen had lost the previous 2 rounds to Red Alert. Could he change that at Herning? Past Blue Power's marker and into the lead with a distance of 84.70. The marker going in and the hammer coming off. Now, could Red Alert extend his run to 3 successive victories? It didn't take long to get the answer. He steamed down the track and was only 5 meters short of a second full pull. So victory for Peter Clark, who also breathed a sigh of relief, but he tried to start for the pull-off. His batteries were dead, so he had to borrow a set to get started and just made it in time. Caesar had big problems of a different kind. Hörby drifted wide, and when he brake corrected, he got unbalanced and into all sorts of problems. His wife Anna unable to look, but glad that they all have to wear safety belts. And here you can see how wild it really was. Crashing down and puncturing the front right, which in fact was the only damage, and Pekka said, well, if I'd have known that, I'd have carried on. Here's the result. The margin between the top 2 over 11 meters, and in this class that's pretty emphatic. And with 4th place to Deer Hunter, he retained 3rd place in the points table ahead of Blue Power. And with 1 discard, Red Alert would really lead by 76 points to 80. So nothing decided until the last round. We go over now to the minis, where 6 have reached the final. And 1 could make sure of taking the Euro Cup for the first time, with 3 firsts and a second to his credit. Simply Irresistible had been just that this year, sweeping all before him, apart from that 1 defeat by Landy, and it looked very much as if it would be the same at Herning. Over the 110-meter mark for his second full pull. And there were only 2 others who could touch him, and they were both from Holland. Here's the first, Gert Dingerink and Lambada 4. Over 100 meters, then it got really hard, and he had to settle for 3rd place with 105.85. But what about Landy? He'd won in Bernay. How about Herning as well? Dirk Veenstra decided to go for it. He flew down the track and only stopped when he passed 110 meters. So another full pull. And when the dust had settled, officials could see that for the first time in the 96 series, a second pull-off was necessary to decide the winner. Although Simply Irresistible had in fact covered 110 meters 30, 4 meters longer than Landy, they had both passed 110 meters, and that was the qualifying mark for a second pull-off. But the rerun proved to be just a formality. Landy only needed to pull to win, as problems kept Simply Irresistible in the pits. So he pulled, and he won. And the distance, well, that was immaterial. His second Euro Cup victory was a fact, and perhaps if he'd attended more events, he could have made a serious challenge for the title. In the points table, Simply Irresistible had done enough to take the title. The last round was just a formality for him. Day 2 was warm and real suntan weather. And in the 4.4 ton modifieds, an extra pull-off was also needed to decide the winner. This is Jan van Eltham bidding to join 2 others who've made a double full pull. His 3 Allison V12s made no mistake. They powered him all the way to a second pull-off. His mechanic did the high jump in delight, but he would soon be busy. They had problems when they got back to the pits. Well, Popeye was in pretty tough company. Fox and Desperate Dan were his opposition, and it was between these 2 as to who would take the title. Naturally, the Danes knew who they were supporting. This team here, Peter Larsen and Fox. The sledge was made really heavy this time, so there was never any question of yet another full pull. But it was an excellent attempt. And the distance, 89.97 meters. Now, was that enough? Well, Desperate Dan never shirks a challenge. And this was certainly that. But Brian Armistead and his canny mechanic, Carl Carter, found some extra oomph from somewhere. And that was enough to power them past Fox and give them their 3rd win of the series. 96.99 was the distance, and when Popeye couldn't come out for the second pull-off, Fox took second place. 7 meters between the top 2, but that meant 4 extra points to Desperate Dan, and that was important if you look at the points table. With 1 round discarded, Desperate Dan has 76 to Fox's 72, so all to be decided at round 6. But before we take our last break, here's some fireworks from Magcal Bits and Pieces. Taking part in the 4.4 ton class, a plug came out, all with dramatic results. When something like that happens, you're not sure what's gone wrong, you fear the worst, but you hope for the best. And whilst they do damage assessment, here it is again in slow motion. Everything hunky-dory, and then a big explosion which frightened the cameraman and gave Willem Veldhuizen a sinking feeling. But the damage was not as bad as he'd feared, so time for us to buzz off for another break. Stay with us. Welcome back to the final round in the review of the 1996 Eurocup Series. We're at Meerkerk in Holland, where again the weather was kind and there was a very large crowd. We start with the Superstocks. If Magcal Bits and Pieces won and Red Alert was second, they'd be level on points, but the winner here would take the title. That was the situation as Red Alert came out for his single qualifying run. The track was hard and Peter Clark had altered his tyre settings for the first time during the season. And he is now asking himself, was that wise? Just see what happened. Edging to his right, but then he corrects and he gets unbalanced, slings across to the left and clips the chalk line just before the 100 meters, and that meant disqualification. And it didn't look any better from our other camera. Braking like mad to keep it in and then just clipping the corner. So a whole season's efforts decided in 10 seconds, and that trip back to the pits, a nightmare for Peter Clark, who'll be trying to work out what went wrong. So Red Alert disqualified, and there were 4 who made it to the pull-off. 2 from Finland, 2 from Holland, with Delta Power the quickest qualifier. Leonard Griffin had the honour of leading the way, and what a relief it must have been to know that first or fourth he would still win the Eurocup for the 3rd successive year. That didn't affect his performance though, straight down the middle, over 100 metres, as if to say to the rest, beat that if you can. An excellent run, 102.61, the distance to beat. Caesar came, Caesar saw, and Caesar hoped to conquer. But Pekka Hörby had to accept second place with a distance of just under 100 metres. Looking across to see how far short he was. 96.85 for Caesar. And then it was the turn of double European champion Hurricane, who chosen to concentrate on the Dutch Championship rather than tour Europe with the Eurocup series, as it takes quite a bit of time. But even Hurricane was unable to threaten the top two and just crept into the low 90s. 93.91 for third place in this final round. So it was congratulations to Willem and Leonard on an easier victory than even they had expected. Here's the final result. Once again, Magkal Bits and Pieces on top, with Valmet's persistence paying off with second and fourth places to Pekka Hörby. In the points table, the Dutch team convincing winners, Red Alert second, and even though Deer Hunter failed to make the final pull-off, he was still third. So congratulations to Wim, Leonard, Willem and Peter for a competition with surprises right to the end. We move on to the minis, where the only surprise was that Lambada 4 was out of action and unable to run. But Peter Doman was running with Nightmare. And this pull turned into a bit of a nightmare. Heading for the edge, always shuts off, crashes down and breaks his front wheels. And that was the end of that. 58.95, didn't win any prizes, but she enjoyed the run. Well, 4 minis had made it to the pull-off, and again, Mr. Consistency, Simply Irresistible, was one of them. And the new German turbine was another. Well, Simply Irresistible had already won the Eurocup. What better way to end the season than underlying your superiority in front of your own fans? And that's what they did. Almost a perfect pull, just short of 100 meters, but that was better than the rest could manage. The marker going in, the distance 97.48 for Simply Irresistible. At the other end, Ghostbuster 2 was having a little problem, but nothing that a fire extinguisher couldn't sort out. And then it was up to Helmut Schwartz to show how impressive his new turbine really was. He'd been consistently faster than Ghostbuster 1, and between them they were sharing the German mini title with Thomas Zimmermann and Joker. Well, maybe Helmut was holding something back for the Europeans because he couldn't match the leader on this occasion. 8 meters less in 89.3. Then it was time for a new mini to try his luck. Frank Verboven and ZZ Top. Powered by a Rodec 540, Frank had just built this replacement for Stubborn Sister. And here he was in the final. Maybe that's one of his fans. Well, for a new mini, Frank did well. But he couldn't come close enough to challenge the top two. 84.62 his distance, and the last in the pull-off, Lambada 3, driven by Gert's father Willem, who said he was jinxed by the TV cameras. Every time he was filmed, something went wrong. Let's see if today was an exception. Oh no, apparently not. His blower drive belt snaps and he stops, with Gert running out to retrieve the offending article. 80.94 gave Lambada 3 fourth place, and Willem wouldn't mind if he never saw another camera. Now here's the result. and everything that needs to be said about the winner has been. But Ghostbuster 2 could well be a threat in 97. In the points table, Lambada could have been relegated to third place, but Landy failed to make the pull-off and so lost out by 2. So a clean sweep for Holland, and Egbert Dross sharing the top spot with co-driver Dirk Dijkstra. Now we move swiftly on to the last event, the 4.4-ton modifieds. There were 8 in the pull-off. Here are the ones who decided where the Eurocup should go in 1996. Walibi Flevo, Id Koopmanschie had been invincible. Could he pull out all the stops and win this final event as well? Hayes Sitzling really gave full throttle all the way. And it paid dividends into the middle 90s for the man and the machine in black. .94.59 and a hard distance to beat. And the Koopmanschie fans didn't think that was possible. So now the spotlight turned to Fox. Peter Larsen needed to beat Desperate Dan to come from behind and take the title at this, the last hurdle. He didn't do enough to threaten Koopmanschie, but the distance Desperate Dan had to aim for was the important one, and that was 90.95. Reigning champion Green Spirit not there, more technical problems keeping him in the workshop, but their fans sending him a message. Now, Desperate Dan, Brian Armistead knew what he had to do. 90.95 was the target. Was he going to win the Eurocup for the first time, or was it going to Fox for the third time? And look at that. Too close to call. He needs 90.96 to win. And he beats Fox by 2 centimetres. And that thumbs up says it all. But there was still one more to run. Could Q8 Team Popeye roar past them all and possibly snatch third place? Jan van Alphen. Problems with the steering there. But no problem in taking second spot after Koopmanschie. 92.32 for Popeye, so the 1996 Eurocup series at an end. Surprises to the last. Desperate Dan takes his first Eurocup after beating Fox by just 2 centimetres. And that means a final points table like this, with Q8 Team Popeye edging out Green Fighter into third place. So as Jan, Brian and Peter receive their awards, just a reminder of where to write to for further info or to look it up on internet. Well, that's the Eurocup season from us, and from me, Roger England, it's bye for now.